Before we dive in, let me ask you something. Have you ever seen someone get exactly what they deserve in the most unexpected way? Maybe someone was mean to another person and later got into trouble. Maybe someone thought they were better than others but found out they were wrong. Tell me in the comments. I love hearing real stories from you all. Now, let's get into the story, and trust me, you won't want to stop reading. It was just another quiet afternoon in Pine Hill, a small town where nothing much ever happened. Pine Hill was the kind of town where everyone knew each other. It had just a few streets, a small grocery store, a diner where old friends sat and talked for hours, and a park where kids played until the street lights came on. The sun was setting, painting the sky with colors of orange, pink, and gold. The streets were warm with the soft glow of sunlight. The air smelled fresh, with a hint of baked bread from the little bakery on the corner. People were heading home, tired but happy. Some laughed as they walked, talking about their day. Others were in a hurry, trying to get home before dark. The sound of shoes tapping on the pavement mixed with the distant hum of cars. It was a peaceful evening. And right in the middle of it all was Sarah Walker. Sarah was 23 years old and had lived in Pine Hill her whole life. She had long brown hair, soft hazel eyes, and a kind smile. She was quiet but strong. She loved music, books, and the smell of fresh flowers. But there was one thing that made Sarah different from most people in town. Sarah was blind. She had lost her sight when she was 12 years old due to an illness. At first, it had been hard. The world felt big, dark, and scary. But Sarah was not someone who gave up. She learned how to live without seeing. She memorized the streets, learned to read with her fingers, and trained herself to be independent. She never wanted people to feel sorry for her. She never wanted to be treated as weak. She walked with her head high. And by her side, leading her every step of the way, was Max. Max was not just any dog. He was big and strong, with golden fur and sharp, alert eyes. He looked just like any other guide dog, but Max was special. He had been trained to help Sarah move around safely, stopping her from falling, leading her across streets, and protecting her. But what no one in town knew, not even Sarah's closest friends, was that Max had a past. Before he was a guide dog, Max had been a Navy SEAL canine. Yes, you read that right. Max had been a military dog. He had worked with soldiers. He had been on dangerous missions. He had been trained to fight, to protect, and to take down enemies. But after years of service, Max had been retired. He was given a second chance at life, and he was placed with Sarah. Sarah didn't know about Max's past. To her, he was just her best friend, her protector, her eyes. But today would be different. Across the street, 3 men sat on large motorcycles, the sound of their engines loud and rough. They wore black leather jackets, sunglasses, and heavy boots. Their arms were covered in tattoos, and their faces had smirks that didn't look friendly. They were not from Pine Hill. People in Pine Hill were friendly. They smiled at strangers. They helped their neighbors. But these men were not like that. They were trouble. They had been riding through the town all day, honking at people, laughing loudly, and throwing trash on the streets. People had tried to ignore them, hoping they would leave soon. But now, as the sun went down, they saw Sarah. The leader, a tall man with a scar on his cheek, nudged the man next to him. He grinned. "Hey, look at that," he said, pointing at Sarah. The second man, shorter with a messy beard, chuckled. "A blind girl. Walking all alone," he said. "That's interesting." The third biker, who was younger but just as mean-looking, leaned forward on his bike. "She can't even see us," he whispered. "I bet we could mess with her, and she wouldn't even know." They revved their engines, making their bikes roar loudly. Some people on the sidewalk turned to look but quickly looked away. No one wanted trouble. The three bikers grinned as they watched Sarah walk. They had no idea who they were messing with. Sarah didn't hear them at first. She walked calmly, feeling the pavement under her feet. She held Max's leash firmly in her hand. She could feel Max's warm body moving beside her, guiding her carefully around every step and turn. Then, she heard it. The loud sound of engines. She could tell they were close. She could feel the vibrations in the air. Sarah wasn't scared. She had walked through town many times before. She had been around loud cars and motorcycles before. But something about this felt different. Max's body tensed beside her. That's when she knew something was wrong. The bikers slowly rolled forward, their engines still rumbling. The leader, Scarface, called out, "Hey, lady. You lost." Sarah didn't stop. She kept walking, her grip on Max's leash tightening slightly. The second biker, Beard Guy, laughed. "Maybe she didn't hear you." The third biker, Young Punk, leaned forward. "Maybe she's ignoring us." Scarface smirked. He turned his bike sharply and stopped right in front of Sarah. Sarah couldn't see him, but Max did. And Max stopped walking immediately. Sarah frowned. She knew Max never stopped unless there was danger. Max didn't move. His ears twitched. His nose flared. He could smell sweat, gasoline, and leather. He could hear their heavy breathing, the way their voices sounded mean, the way their hearts beat just a little too fast. He knew these men were bad. He stood in front of Sarah, his body slightly ahead of hers, a protective stance. Sarah whispered, "What is it, boy?" Max let out a low, deep growl. A warning. But the bikers just laughed. Beard Guy sneered. "Oh, scary dog." Young Punk grinned. "What are you gonna do, little mutt? Lick me to death." Scarface smirked and reached for Sarah's arm. "Hey, sweetheart, need a little help?" He touched her sleeve. And that's when everything changed. What do you think happens next? Should Max attack? Should Sarah say something? What would you do in this situation? Let me know in the comments. And keep reading, because you won't believe what happens next. Sarah kept walking, her steps steady, her heart calm. She had been in situations like this before, times when people thought they could push her around just because she couldn't see. But she had learned something important a long time ago. The best thing to do? Ignore them. She didn't need to answer. She didn't need to react. Most of the time, when she didn't give people attention, they got bored and left. But this time, something felt different. The sound of motorcycles rumbled louder as the men followed her. She could hear the heavy boots scraping against the pavement. She could feel them getting closer. Sarah gripped Max's leash a little tighter. Max was more than a guide dog. He was her best friend. He was her protector. And right now, he was tense. His body was rigid, alert, ready. One of the bikers, the tallest one, laughed again. His leather jacket had big bold letters on the back, Iron Fangs. A fitting name for someone like him. "Hey, lady. You lost." He called out again, his voice teasing. Sarah kept walking. She didn't flinch. She didn't slow down. But inside, she felt a small knot forming in her stomach. She knew these types of men. They didn't just walk away. She heard the grinding sound of tires on the pavement as the bikers moved in closer. The rumbling of their motorcycles made her chest feel tight. Then, suddenly silence. They had stopped moving. For a second, Sarah thought maybe they had given up. Maybe they were done playing their little game. But then a hand grabbed her sleeve. "You need a little help, sweetheart." A voice sneered. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The grip was firm, not rough, not painful but unwanted. The feeling of a stranger's hand on her jacket sent a chill through her body. She took a step back, but the man's fingers held tight. Max stiffened instantly. Then a low, deep growl. The sound rumbled from Max's chest, a warning so clear, so sharp, that even Sarah felt the tension shift in the air. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, the second biker, a man with a messy beard and a cigarette hanging from his lips, laughed. "Oh, scary dog," he mocked. The third biker, younger, cockier, sneered. "What are you gonna do, little mutt? Lick me to death." The three of them burst into laughter. They thought it was funny. They had no idea. Sarah clenched her jaw. She wanted to jerk her arm away, but she knew better than to act in fear. Fear made people weak. Fear made people easy targets. Instead, she took a deep breath, steadying herself. She spoke clearly, her voice firm. "Let go." The man gripping her sleeve didn't move at first. Then, slowly, he tightened his grip. "What if I don't?" he said, his voice smooth, almost playful. Sarah's heartbeat pounded in her ears. She couldn't see them, but she could feel them. She knew they were circling her like wolves. She knew they thought they were in control. But they weren't. Not even close. Max let out another growl, this time louder, sharper, more dangerous. Sarah felt the energy shift. Max wasn't just growling anymore. He was warning them. The first biker, the one gripping her jacket, finally let go. But he didn't step back. He didn't leave. Instead, he chuckled. "Relax, sweetheart," he said. "We're just having fun." His voice dripped with mocking amusement. Sarah stood her ground. She didn't move. She didn't flinch. And neither did Max. She felt every muscle in Max's body tense. If they made one wrong move, if they got just a little closer, Max would strike. The air around them was thick with tension. The bikers were still laughing, still acting like they were in control. They had no idea how wrong they were. Sarah could tell they were underestimating her. They thought she was just a blind girl with a dog. They didn't know who Max was. They didn't know what he was capable of. Sarah took a slow breath. Then, she did something that surprised even herself. She smiled. Not a big smile. Not a scared smile. A small, knowing smile. Because she knew something they didn't. She wasn't the one in danger. They were. The laughter of the bikers faded just a little. Maybe they had noticed the way Sarah stood taller. Maybe they had noticed the way Max's growl deepened into something more primal, more serious. Or maybe, just maybe, they were starting to realize that they had made a very, very big mistake. Sarah tilted her head slightly, as if she were listening to something they couldn't hear. Then, in a voice calm and quiet, she said 4 simple words. "You should walk away." For a second, none of them spoke. Then, the leader laughed again, but this time it sounded just a little forced. "And why's that, sweetheart?" Sarah kept her small smile. Then, she reached down and gave Max the lightest, softest tap on his collar. A simple signal. A small command. The bikers didn't notice it. But Max did. And in less than a second, everything changed. Max moved. Not just a step. Not just a turn. He lunged. It happened too fast. The leader barely had time to react before Max's massive body knocked him backward. He stumbled, falling to the ground, hard. The second biker jumped back, cursing. The third biker's cocky grin disappeared. Max didn't bite. Max didn't attack. But he had made his point. Loud and clear. Sarah stood there, still calm, still in control. She waited. She listened. She could hear the man on the ground panting, shocked, frozen. Max stood over him, his body strong, his head high, his deep, dark eyes locked on the man below. Sarah finally spoke again, her voice soft but firm. "I told you to walk away." The man on the ground swallowed hard. Sarah didn't need to see his face to know that he was afraid now. For the first time, he was the one feeling small. For the first time, he was the one who wanted to run. And Sarah? She simply gave another small tap on Max's collar. And just like that, Max stepped back. The leader scrambled to his feet, breathing heavily. No one laughed now. No one smiled. The bikers stood there for a moment, stunned, silent. Then, without another word, they turned. They got on their bikes. And they sped away. Sarah stood still, listening to the sound of the engines fade into the distance. She felt Max's body relax beside her. She smiled again. Then, with a calm, steady step, she kept walking. Because Sarah Walker? She wasn't scared. She had never been scared. And now, the bikers knew why. Sarah took a deep breath, keeping her face calm. She didn't want to show fear. Fear made people weak, and she had spent years learning how to be strong. She knew that people often underestimated her because she couldn't see. They thought she was helpless. But she wasn't. Her fingers tightened slightly around Max's leash. She reached down and gave a small, almost invisible signal on Max's collar. To anyone watching, it looked like nothing. Just a simple touch. But to Max, it was a command. The big dog immediately straightened. His muscles tensed. His ears twitched. He could feel the danger in the air. Max wasn't just any guide dog. He was a retired Navy SEAL K9. Before coming to Sarah, Max had been a warrior. He had served in high-risk missions. He had taken down dangerous criminals. He had worked alongside some of the world's best soldiers. He wasn't just trained to help. He was trained to fight. And these three bikers? They had no idea what was coming. Sarah could feel the silence in the air. It was heavy, thick, filled with tension. She didn't flinch. She didn't move back. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly and spoke in a calm, even voice. "You should leave now." The leader scoffed. "Or what?" His voice was filled with amusement. He didn't take her seriously. He thought she was just a blind girl with a dog. He had no idea how wrong he was. Max took a single step forward. It was a small movement, but it sent a clear message. The second biker, the one with a messy beard, shifted uncomfortably. "Hey, man," he muttered, "maybe we should just go." The leader rolled his eyes. "What, are you scared of a dog?" He laughed. Sarah could hear the fake confidence in his voice. She could tell he didn't like that his friend was hesitating. She could tell that he didn't like that she wasn't afraid. Max let out a low, deep growl. It wasn't loud. But it was deadly. It was the kind of growl that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. The kind of growl that made you think twice. Sarah kept her voice steady. "You don't want to do this." The leader gritted his teeth. "You think your little puppy scares me?" Max's ears flicked. His body was still. His sharp eyes were locked on the man in front of him. Sarah knew Max was waiting. He was waiting for her command. He was waiting for the wrong move. And if that move came, it would be over. The second biker took another step back. "Man, I don't know," he muttered again. "That dog looks different." The leader turned to glare at him. "He's just a mutt," he snapped. "He's not gonna do anything." The third biker, younger than the others, was still smirking. but there was something nervous about it now. Sarah could hear it. She could hear it in the way they breathed. She could hear it in the way their weight shifted. They weren't as confident as before. She could tell they were starting to doubt themselves. Max's growl rumbled again. It was deeper this time. More dangerous. Sarah waited. She wasn't going to back down. She wasn't going to run. She knew these types of men. She knew that the only way to make them leave was to stand her ground. The leader took a step closer. Max didn't move. His muscles stayed tight. His eyes stayed locked. Sarah's fingers rested on his leash. She was ready. The leader smirked. Let's see what happens if I... He moved. His hand reached forward. And in that split second, Max lunged. The bikers didn't even have time to react. One moment, the leader was standing tall. The next, he was on the ground. Flat on his back. Eyes wide. Breath gone. Max hadn't bitten him. He hadn't attacked. He had simply knocked him over with sheer strength. And now, Max stood over him. His paws were firm on the man's chest. His teeth were bared, but he didn't bite. He didn't need to. The leader was frozen. Sarah could hear his ragged breathing. She could hear the way his hands trembled. He was scared. Very, very scared. The second biker stepped back fast. Whoa, whoa, whoa. He shouted. Call him off. Sarah tilted her head. Why? She asked. I thought you weren't scared of a dog. The third biker, the younger one, was already backing away. The leader swallowed hard. Okay, okay. He gasped. I get it. Just get him off me. Sarah smiled slightly. You're going to leave now, she said. And you're not going to bother me again. Yes. Yes, we're leaving. The second biker said quickly. The leader nodded fast. Yeah. We're done. Just get him off me. Sarah reached down and gave another small tap on Max's collar. Instantly, Max stepped back. The leader scrambled to his feet. He was shaking. His face was red. He glared at Sarah, but he didn't say a word. The second biker grabbed his motorcycle. Come on, man. Let's go. The third biker was already starting his engine. The leader clenched his jaw. Then, without another word, he got on his bike. The engines roared to life. And just like that, they were gone. Sarah stood still, listening as the sound of the motorcycles faded into the distance. She felt Max relax beside her. She smiled. Then, without another word, she kept walking. Because Sarah Walker? She had never been the one in danger. And now, those bikers knew it too. Sarah stood still, her hand firm on Max's leash. Her heart was calm, steady. She had given these men a chance to walk away, but they had ignored her. They thought they were in control. They thought she was weak. But they were wrong. She took a slow breath, feeling the air shift around her. She didn't need to see them to know what was happening. She could hear it. She could feel it. The weight of their presence. The nervous shifting of their boots on the pavement. The quick, sharp breaths they were trying to hide. She knew fear when she heard it. And now, they were afraid. She gave Max a simple command, one word. Defend. In an instant, everything changed. Max moved. Fast. Powerful. Precise. Before the leader could even react, Max lunged forward. 1 second, the man was standing tall, smirking. The next, he was flat on his back. His body hit the ground hard. The air rushed out of his lungs. He gasped, eyes wide, mouth open in shock. He had no time to fight back. No time to defend himself. Max's massive body pinned him down. The dog's powerful front paws pressed against his chest, holding him in place. The leader tried to move, but he couldn't. And then, snap! Max's jaws closed just inches from his throat. Not biting. Not attacking. Just warning. But the message was clear. The leader went still. Completely. His eyes were wide, his breathing fast and uneven. For the first time that night, he knew real fear. The second biker, the one with the messy beard, stumbled backward. What the? His hand reached out, as if to pull Max away. But Max whipped around in an instant. Lightning fast. His sharp fangs bared. His growl low, deep, dangerous. The second biker's face went pale. He tried to take a step forward. But his feet betrayed him. He tripped, falling backward onto the pavement. His breath came in sharp gasps as he scrambled away. But Max didn't chase him. Max didn't need to. The biker already knew. He had lost. And the third biker? The youngest of the three? He didn't even wait to see what happened next. His hands shook as he grabbed his motorcycle. His heart pounded as he turned the key. And the second the engine roared to life, he was gone. Tires screeched as his bike sped away. Sarah heard it. She smiled. She had expected one of them to run. Cowards always did. But now, she turned her attention back to the man beneath Max's paws. The leader. The tough guy. The one who had thought she was weak. Now, he was shaking. He gasped for breath, his voice barely a whisper. Call him off. Call him off. Sarah tilted her head, pretending to think. Then, she smiled again. Apologize first. The man's lips trembled. I'm sorry. He gasped. Max didn't move. The man's breath came out fast and uneven. He swallowed hard. I didn't know. Please. Sarah listened. His words weren't confident anymore. His voice wasn't mocking. There was no laughter now. Only fear. Pure, real fear. Sarah took her time. Then, she raised her fingers to her lips. And gave a sharp whistle. Instantly, Max released him. Perfect discipline. Not a second too soon, not a second too late. The leader scrambled to his feet. His hands were shaking. He didn't say another word. He didn't try to act tough. He didn't even look at Sarah. Instead, he turned. And ran to his bike. The second biker was already on his. They didn't waste time. Engines roared. Tires screeched. And just like that, they were gone. Sarah stood still, listening as the sound of motorcycles faded into the night. She reached down, her fingers brushing against Max's fur. He was calm. Relaxed. As if nothing had happened. She smiled. Then, she whispered, "Good boy." Max wagged his tail, happy, proud, ready to move on. Sarah turned forward. And kept walking. Because tonight, she had proved something important. She wasn't weak. She had never been weak. And now, those men? They would never forget her. As the sound of the motorcycles faded into the night, Sarah stood still for a moment, listening. The loud engines had once filled the air with noise and danger, but now, all that was left was silence. A peaceful, calm silence. The street was empty again, except for a few people who had stopped to watch what had happened. They had seen everything: the bikers, the threats, the way Max had taken them down without even needing to bite. Across the street, an older man, dressed in a worn-out blue jacket, let out a long, low whistle. "Now that," he said, shaking his head, "is a dog you don't mess with." Sarah turned her head toward the voice. She could tell he was smiling. She knelt down, her hands finding Max's fur. She ruffled his thick coat, feeling the warmth of his body, the strength in his muscles. "Good boy," she whispered. Max wagged his tail, his job done. But to him, this wasn't just a job. It was his duty. He had protected Sarah, just like he had been trained to do all his life. Only now, instead of soldiers, instead of war zones, his mission was simple: keep his person safe. And he had done just that. Sarah could feel her heart beating steady and strong. She wasn't scared. She had never been scared. The only ones who had been afraid tonight were the ones who had thought they could push her around. And now, they were gone. The older man across the street chuckled, stepping forward. "I gotta say, miss," he said, "I've seen a lot of tough people in my time. But you might be the toughest of them all." Sarah smiled. "I just did what I had to do." The man nodded, looking down at Max. "And this dog of yours, where did you get him? He's not like other dogs, is he?" Sarah ran her fingers gently down Max's back, feeling his strong muscles relax now that the danger had passed. "He's special," she said simply. The man chuckled. "Special? That's an understatement." Sarah could hear the amazement in his voice. "He didn't even have to bite them," the man continued. "Just took one down like it was nothing. I don't know much about dogs, but I'd bet my last dollar he's seen more action than most people ever will." Sarah tilted her head slightly. "You think so?" The man let out another small laugh. "Miss, I'd say that dog of yours was made for more than just guiding. You got yourself a real protector there." Sarah smiled, feeling Max press against her side, his tail wagging lightly. "I know," she said softly. "And I wouldn't trade him for anything." The man tipped his hat. "Well, if you ever need help, you just holler. But something tells me you can take care of yourself just fine." Sarah stood up, adjusting her grip on Max's leash. "Thank you," she said kindly. The man nodded, then slowly walked away, shaking his head in wonder. Sarah turned in the direction of her home. The air was cool, fresh, peaceful. She took a deep breath and started walking again, Max guiding her with smooth, steady steps. The night felt different now. Safer. Stronger. She knew the bikers wouldn't come back. They had learned their lesson. They had been humbled. But what if they told others? What if more people like them came looking for trouble? Sarah wasn't worried. Because trouble didn't scare her. And with Max by her side, she was untouchable. As she walked past the small shops and quiet streets, she could still hear people whispering. "Did you see that? That dog took him down in one move." She didn't even flinch. Sarah didn't need to turn toward the voices to know they were amazed. They had all expected her to be weak. They had all thought she would need help. But she had proved them wrong. She had proved to everyone that she wasn't someone to be pitied. She was someone to be respected. And Max? He was more than just a guide dog. He was a guardian. A protector. A force to be reckoned with. As Sarah walked, a warm breeze passed through the street, rustling her hair gently. She reached down and gave Max another soft pat on the head. "You ready to go home, buddy?" she asked. Max wagged his tail, his body pressing against her as he guided her forward. He didn't need to answer. He was always ready. Together, they disappeared down the street, their footsteps calm, strong, unshaken. And just like that, the night belonged to them. Sarah kept walking, the night air cool against her skin. The sounds of the motorcycles had long faded, leaving only the gentle hum of the town around her. The breeze rustled the leaves in the trees, and in the distance, she could hear the soft chirping of crickets. The world had returned to its peaceful state, as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Sarah knew it. And so did everyone who had seen. She could still feel the quiet eyes of the people who had witnessed the whole thing. They had watched, expecting her to need help, expecting her to be afraid. But instead, they had seen something else. They had seen strength. They had seen power. They had seen a blind woman and her dog stand their ground and make 3 men run away in fear. Sarah didn't need to see their faces to know what they were thinking. How did she do that? Who is she? What kind of dog is that? The whispers continued as she walked past a small cafe. She heard chairs scrape against the pavement as someone stood up. "Excuse me," a voice called out. Sarah slowed down. Max immediately picked up on her hesitation and stopped with her, standing firm, always aware of her every movement. "Yes," she answered. The voice belonged to a woman. Older. Kind. "I just wanted to say, that was incredible," the woman said, still sounding a little shocked. "I've never seen anything like that in my life." Sarah smiled slightly. "Thank you. I mean, the way your dog..." The woman hesitated. "He's not just a guide dog, is he?" Sarah ran her fingers through Max's fur. "No," she admitted softly. "He's more than that." The woman let out a breath. "Well, whatever he is, he's a hero." Max wagged his tail at the sound of her voice, but he didn't move closer. He was still in guard mode. He wouldn't relax until Sarah told him it was okay. Sarah nodded. "He is." There was a long pause. Then the woman spoke again. "I don't think those men will come back." Sarah tilted her head. "No," she agreed. "They won't. Because they had learned their lesson." The woman sighed. I feel bad that you had to go through that. This town isn't usually like this." "I know," Sarah said simply. "But people like them are everywhere. They think they can do whatever they want. They think people like me can't fight back." The woman hesitated. "And, is that why you have him? Because you knew something like this could happen?" Sarah smiled, but there was something unreadable in her expression. "No. I have him because he needed me as much as I needed him." The woman seemed to consider her words for a moment before finally nodding. "Well," she said, "whatever the reason, I'm glad you have him." Sarah gave a polite nod and then turned forward again. "Have a good night." The woman didn't answer right away. It was as if she was still watching, thinking. And then, finally, she whispered, "You too." Sarah started walking again, Max moving effortlessly beside her. The streets were quieter now, but she could still hear the occasional murmur of conversation. She ignored it, focusing only on the familiar sounds of the town she knew so well. Max's footsteps were steady. Strong. He was always watching. Listening. Ready. Just like he had been trained to do. They walked past the small bakery, the smell of fresh bread still lingering in the air. Sarah knew the owner well, a sweet older man named Mr. Thompson who always gave her a free cookie when she passed by. Tonight, though, she heard the door creak open as he stepped outside. "Sarah!" he called gently. She stopped again. "Yes, Mr. Thompson. I heard about what happened." His voice was careful, like he didn't want to upset her. "Are you okay?" Sarah smiled a little. "I'm fine." The old man let out a breath. "That dog of yours is something special, isn't he?" Sarah knelt down, running her fingers through Max's fur again. "Yes," she said softly. "He is." Mr. Thompson chuckled. "Well, I just put out a fresh batch of cookies. You should take one before you head home." Sarah laughed lightly. "That sounds nice." She heard him step back into the shop for a moment before returning. A warm cookie was placed gently into her hand. "Thank you," she said, feeling the soft warmth against her fingertips. "You be safe now," Mr. Thompson said. Sarah nodded. "I always am." With that, she continued walking, Max guiding her smoothly. The streets of Pine Hill were calm again. But something felt different. Sarah could feel it in the air. People were going to remember this night. Not because of fear. Not because of violence. But because a blind woman and her dog had faced 3 dangerous men, and won. Sarah wasn't one for attention. She had never wanted to be famous, never wanted people to talk about her like she was a legend. But tonight? People would talk. And Sarah was okay with that. Because if her story made even one person think twice before judging someone based on their weakness, then maybe, just maybe, this night had happened for a reason. She turned onto the final street leading to her apartment. The air was quiet, peaceful. Max's leash felt light in her hand, but she knew better. He was always alert. Always aware. She reached down and gave him a small pat. "You did good today, buddy," she murmured. Max's tail wagged. Sarah smiled. And together, they stepped into the night. A woman and her protector. Unstoppable. Unbreakable. And absolutely not to be messed with. Sometimes, the world looks at someone and sees only what is missing. They see someone small and think they are weak. They see someone quiet and think they are afraid. They see someone kind and think they are helpless. But the world forgets something important. True strength isn't about size. It isn't about who yells the loudest or who throws the first punch. True strength is standing your ground when others expect you to fall. It is knowing your worth when others think you have none. It is having the power to fight but choosing not to, unless you must. Sarah knew this. She had known it for a long time. She had spent years listening to people tell her what she couldn't do. That she couldn't be independent. That she couldn't be strong. That she couldn't protect herself. And for a long time, maybe even she had believed it. But not anymore. Not tonight. Tonight, she had shown everyone, even herself, what she was truly capable of. Because strength isn't about what you can see. It's about what you know to be true. And tonight, Sarah knew she was strong. She had stood her ground. She had stayed calm. She had let Max do what he did best: protect. And those bikers? They had learned their lesson. They had thought she was weak. But now, they knew the truth. They had laughed at her. They had thought it was funny to pick on someone they assumed was powerless. But power doesn't always look like what you expect. Sometimes, power is a quiet woman walking down the street with her dog. Sometimes, power is not being afraid when others try to scare you. Sometimes, power is a single word: defend, and the way the world changes in the blink of an eye. Sarah had never wanted to prove herself. She had never wanted to be a lesson for anyone. But now, those men would never forget her. They would never forget the blind woman who made them run. They would never forget the dog who knocked them down. They would never forget the moment they learned that sometimes, the quietest people are the strongest. Sarah knew they wouldn't return. They wouldn't tell their friends about what happened. Because their story was not one of victory. It was a story of defeat. And men like them. They didn't like to admit when they had lost. Sarah walked home that night with her head high. She wasn't scared. She had never been scared. She had been underestimated, yes. But never weak. Max walked beside her, his tail wagging slightly, his steps strong and steady. He had done his job. He had protected her. He had made sure the world knew what he had known all along. Sarah Walker was not to be messed with. She reached her apartment and unlocked the door, stepping inside. The air was warm, familiar. Safe. Max followed her in, settling down at her feet as she took a deep breath. She thought about the night. About the fight she didn't start. About the battle she had won without ever throwing a punch. And she smiled. Because tonight, she had proven something. Not just to those men. Not just to the people watching. But to herself. She was strong. She was brave. She was unstoppable. She knelt down, running a hand through Max's thick fur. "Good boy," she whispered. Max wagged his tail. He had known all along. Sarah leaned back against the couch, exhaling softly. Tomorrow, life would go on. Tomorrow, she would walk those same streets again. Tomorrow, she would hear people whisper about what happened. Some would be amazed. Some would be inspired. And some would never look at her the same way again. But Sarah? She would just keep being herself. Because she didn't need the world to see her as strong. She knew she was. And that was enough. As she closed her eyes, Max curled up beside her, his breathing slow, steady. A protector. A friend. A guardian in the dark. Sarah smiled once more before whispering into the quiet of the night. "Let them underestimate me." Then, she closed her eyes. And slept peacefully. Because she had nothing left to fear.